NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, offering solar options, energy security, and solutions for the local community. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, a much-needed dose of hope with the side of calls to action with folk artist Chris Matthews, who'll be performing at the Iron Horse this evening.
And a fond farewell to a much-beloved music and American studies professor who'll soon head across the pond to encounter new voyages and studies in sound, Steve Waksman of Smith College.
But first, just across the street, music history in photographs right before our very eyes.
We are on Main Street in Northampton at the Michelson Gallery, where tonight and this weekend will be an exhibit. It will be a lost weekend for all of us, but specifically for you. May Pang, you are an artist and a photographer, and this exhibit features your photography. You are famous for something, and I'll be fully honest to say, is it weird to be famous for this thing that happened 50 years ago?
Absolutely. I mean, it is weird. You know, to be famous, to go out with a man, I guess, was very famous in the 20th century and still known in the 21st century. John Lennon, I think so. Yeah. But, you know, I worked in the music business, but I'm not famous for some of the stuff I did there. It's more on this than anything else.
Which honestly is what I'm more curious about, is all the other stuff that you did. But
we should mention, there are tons of photographs of John Lennon and incredible photographs behind the scenes, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But who's May Pang apart from that?
Yeah, but you know, I've been very fortunate. Being a part of the thing with John Lennon also gave me an opportunity to be at places that not everybody realized. I was there for all this, and, you know, participating in the last jam session with John and Paul.
This is post-Beatles that, you know,
And
there's a photograph of this sort of right over here, right?
Yeah, and this was the next day after the session. They, you know, Paul and Linda and the rest of the family came by for the visit before we were going to the studio. And it's funny because in this little, you see the jeans that John's wearing? Yeah. They're mine.
Oh, to have that waistline.
Yes. And, you know,
also, like, letting people know this wasn't a trend that just started.
Yeah. And you are a witness to history of this iconic moment. I know that you were there when they were filming the Imagine video. I know that you...
Right, the Imagine video, the Mind Games video, you name it. I didn't realize it. You know, it's only going backwards and finally saying, oh, I was there for that. Oh, I was there for that. And then I realized how many things I've been a part of.
You sang on Happy Christmas, War's Over.
That too, I sang on that. But the one that most people didn't realize was the Number 9 Dream, that it's actually my voice whispering John's name.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Yeah. I can't wait to hear you saying it backwards when I backmask it again.
Oh, yeah, when you do the backmask on that one, yes.
But tell us about who May Pang is apart from this part of your life.
You know, I was growing up in Spanish Harlem. A Chinese girl growing up in Spanish Harlem is kind of weird. And
New York's a weird and awesome place.
Yeah, it is. But you know, music was really the thing that touched me, that spoke to me. You know, because I came from a household where I wasn't accepted by my father because I was a girl. I'm the first one to be born in this country on either side of the family. So here I am.
American-born Chinese.
Yes. So they always called me the odd one out. and the music spoke to me. And so I wanted to be in rock and roll. And, you know, here I am.
Why the production end and not creation end?
I think at the time it was the production. I didn't mind it, you know. I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand what it was to be behind the scenes, to put what it took to make an album, to make a record, you know, 45. For me, the lyrics on some of the songs were amazing, not just about John, but anybody that was growing up. Carole King was like one of my... I mean, what else?
Still, for me.
Yes. And now you could relate to it, the relationship, and when they, you know, will you still love me tomorrow? You know, everything.
We're at the Michelson Gallery with May Pang, who tonight, 6 to 8 p.m., there'll be a reception here where you can meet May Pang. You can see these glorious photographs.
But they could also come during the day. I'm here all day.
Oh, yeah. So if you're listening to this now, she might be hiding in the gallery somewhere.
That's right.
Take us to another one of your photographs that you want to tell us a story about.
Why don't we go to the first one that I ever took of that gentleman that we are talking about. I was working at the record company,
Apple, right?
Apple Records in New York, and John and Yoko came into town, And I'm like, oh my God, there they are, you know, larger than life. And all of a sudden I get this call from the office manager. Said, John and Yoko are in town. They're making a couple of films. They need people to work for them, and you're one of them. I said, what? Okay. And so we were making 2 movies that Yoko had an idea. One was called Up Your Legs Forever. And
Good title.
It's an interesting movie.
yeah. And the other one was called Fly, even more interesting. Catching flies in the dead of winter is not so easy. And this is now in the editing process because we were at the hotel, and I happened to have my camera with me, and I didn't even ask permission. John saw that I had my camera, and he just looked at me and he just smiled, like, here I am, take it, you know. And I was like, I said, thanks, and he said, no problem.
He does have a rakish look in this picture.
Yes, and this is my very first photo of him, and he's drinking his Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper.
Yoko is the reason that you and John started to date, right?
Yes, I did not want to.
You were 23.
No, 22. I was still 22. And John was 32, and I'm going, she just came into my office one day, and I'm thinking, oh, God, I haven't even had my first cup of coffee yet, you know? And she says, I got to speak to you. And I said, okay. So I get my notepad, and I'm ready to write, and he says, you know, John and I are not getting along. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. So she said, well, you know, he's going to start seeing other people. And I'm thinking, oh, somebody else in the mix? You know, here it comes. And I said, all right. And she goes, oh, you don't have a boyfriend. And I looked at her and I said, I'm not interested. She goes, oh, I know you're not, but I think you should go out with him. And I'm looking at her going, no, how about I don't go out with him? And I said, I'm not interested. She goes, I know, but you don't want to see him go out with somebody that isn't going to be nice to him. I said, I don't care. You know, and I remember saying this to friends later on about that. They go, but it's John Lennon. I said, I don't care if it's John Lennon. It's not somebody I want to date. In my head, he's my boss, he's whatever, but he's not the person I'm looking at. I've been with them already over 3 years. So the last thing is, like, I'm not thinking about going out with this guy. She kept pushing, and John had no idea what was going on, and neither did I. So she was doing this grand plan scheme that's going on behind the scenes. And it sort of semi-backfired on her on this one.
What appealed about photography to you?
Well, I started doing photography before I met them. You know, it's like my friends. I looked around and I see people's faces, and I thought they were so interesting that I just wanted to take pictures of just people. It was telling a story. John actually one day when we were together, he said, let me see your photos. And I said, okay. And I didn't know what he was going to say. And he looked at them and he goes, okay, you can carry on. You make me look good.
So portraits always appealed more than like scenes or landscapes for you?
In the beginning, absolutely. Now, many years later, it is now the landscape because I see beauty that I didn't see. All of a sudden, Mother Nature's taken over, or just buildings that, you know, unusual art. So I see it in everything.
We're speaking with May Pang. We're at the R. Michelson Gallery on Main Street in Northampton, where this evening there'll be a reception of her exhibit, The Lost Weekend, the photograph of May Pang. The notion of John Lennon's Lost Weekend has been in the media forever. It, of course, wasn't a weekend. I hope to have a long weekend that lasts 18 months someday. You've spoken periodically throughout the last 50 years about this weekend, but now you have a documentary film. Yes. You have this photo exhibit that's touring all over. What made you want to tell your story of the Lost Weekend now? Well,
you know what? It got to the point that people were telling the story and retelling my story, and but it wasn't correct. So I let a few go, and then all of a sudden now it's blown out of proportion. People saying, I read it somewhere. That's what they said. That I said, you don't understand. It's not that. It's not cut and dry. And they're going, yeah, I know everything about you.
What's the biggest correction you'd love to make in people's minds about what the misconception that they have about you?
There's a lot of them, but I think one of the first ones I would say was the time that they always say, Yoko sent John and May to L.A. She didn't. When John and I got together, we were thinking what we could do, and John wanted some time alone, not in New York. And it just happened that his lawyer was in town. And he turned around and he said, hey, Harold, so when are you leaving? Because he lived out in L.A. He goes, well, I'm on a 6 o'clock flight tonight. He goes, and he just took a beat, and he looked at me, and he looked at him, and he goes, we're getting on the plane with you tonight. So he goes, May, go make the reservations. Yoko had no idea where we had gone. after we were there for a few days, and he says, I guess we should let her know and the staff know that that I'm not in town, that we're out of town. And the other bit was that we did not move out there. We only went out there first off, it was only going to be a week to 2 weeks. We didn't know how long we were going to plan to be out there, and then come home. Instead, we met up with Phil Spector, and then we said, I want to do a rock and roll album. And who better, with Phil and all this. So we stayed there, but we kept flying back home to New York, but nobody knew that. But any antics that you read is about L.A., so they thought we moved out there. We never moved out there. We actually house surf or couch surf.
You were there for or at least the aftermath of the legendary Phil Spector pulls a gun on John Lennon story.
I was the first one to reach the room when I heard the shot. And I just remember, because we were doing playback, and I just sort of went, what is that noise? That jarred, and you see everybody ducking. And I'm standing up like this, looking around like, what happened? And the person standing next to me was Phil's mother. I got to meet Mother Bertha here. And I'm like, oh my God. And I go running towards the sound, and it was to the client's lounge. And I open the door, and there's Phil with the gun, Mal Evans, and John with his finger in his ear going, Phil, you're going to shoot me, but don't mess with me ears. He goes, I need them to listen, And, Phil's being Phil, going, grumbling. And Mal's going, give me that gun. Mal is 6'5" at the time, and Phil is like 5'3", so the size, And next thing I said, what just happened? Next day, John and I are having dinner at some restaurant. I said, oh, I see Mal Evans. And he goes, what, Mal's here? I said, yeah, what's going on? Mal goes, oh, I'm glad I found you. He goes, yeah, I want to show you the bullet from last night. And we both stopped eating, and we went, what do you mean, what bullet? And it turned out that we did not know. We always thought that the bullets were really blanks, but they were real bullets.
Yeah, that tracks for Phil Spector.
A terrifying foreshadowing, both of what Phil Spector will go on to be convicted of doing and what ended up happening to John Lennon.
Yeah, I know. I mean, when he pulled out the gun, it went off automatically, and that could have hurt anybody in that room.
Do you want to show us another photograph?
Okay, we have a few things here. Here's one. This one's called The Dream Is Over. And this is, if you look closely, John is the last one to sign, and I happened to capture his signature as he's signing. This is the part of the dissolution papers that were being signed of the Beatles in Disney World. We were out there, two lawyers, Julian, me, and I was more worried about Julian. So I wasn't, and I'm hearing John going, May, get in here, take some photos. Will you just come and take some photos?
Were the other Beatles there, or was it just John?
No, it's just, the others had already signed it. Mm-hmm. John was the last one.
So you have the photograph of the official end of the Beatles.
Yeah, this is him signing it. You see his hand in there, and you can see as he's writing out his name.
How different was it working with John than working with Yoko on each of their respective works?
She comes from, the sound is different, everything is different. She was quick, but she had a certain idea what she wanted. That's John. They're two different, the style, it comes down to the style. John knew what he wanted in rock and roll. She had a whole mixture. It's not rock and roll. It's not, I don't even know what category we're talking.
It's a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did your work with John and Yoko influence a lot of what you ended up looking for when you were doing more production work later on?
No, and in that they already had their stuff. They knew what they wanted. I mean, they were already there.
No, I mean for your aesthetic and what you were looking for.
Well, I was just very happy. Well, and when it came to John, not so much Yoko, but John would always ask me if I thought the lyrics were good. Did it sound good? Did it have the melody? And I was really surprised that he would ask me, and that I could influence him on that. But I could tell you, my clothing influenced him, because every time I wore something, he goes, oh, I like that, and he'll try and imitate what I was wearing. It's like, that's by my jeans. He took them.
He also made a very famous New York logo on a T-shirt.
Well,
you took a picture of the person taking the picture of that picture.
Right. But what happened was everybody said, oh, it actually was Bob's T-shirt. He took it out of the Gruen, okay, because he's the photographer. Then when they were doing that, it was on our rooftop. It's where we lived, that picture. And I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, and John says, oh, he goes, what T-shirt do you want? He goes, well, I have something in my bag. That's really what happened. You may not remember, but I do. So he took it out and he gave it to John to wear. Because the one thing is John would never cut the sleeves. Too British.
Looking at another photograph by May Pang. What's this photograph we're looking at here at the R. Michelson Gallery, May?
This is called Father and Son. And it was great because this is a picture of John and Julian together. And there's not many of them of the two of them together. And we used to go out on this boat with our neighbor, and which John loves the water, and so did Julian. The two of them out there swimming. It was great fun. He had a good time with his son, and that is one of the, I won't say rare, but it's one of the not too many photos of the two together. And I'm very lucky because John liked one of the pictures I took of him later on, and he used it as the sleeve cover for Imagine in Britain. And so he liked that photo, and Julian asked me for a picture, and that was the album cover for Jude. Yeah, you can see it here. Aww.
He's so cute.
Isn't he cute?
Yeah.
He's adorable. I love him dearly. And his mother and I were very, very close, which I'm glad. I'm very sad she's not here to see all this, but, she was wonderful.
A person that you were in love with that was known to the world, even though your official relationship may have ended, and I know that maybe there was some time after that it continued, but was a victim of a murder of gun violence in New York City. What was your reaction to the assassination of John Lennon?
It was so senseless. There are no words. It just didn't make sense. Everybody has these theories. I'm tired of the theories. He's just not here. The guy who did it, I don't want to ever mention his name. I never wanted to see it. Or have any of that memory, because it was so hard to think that actually happened in New York, a city that he loved. And I remember that night, and I was home and the phone rang, and I picked up the phone, and it was Joan, who was Ringo's executive secretary, and she says, "Give me the number to the hospital." And I said, "He's gone." And all I remember in my ear was, "What's wrong with your bloody country?" And that's exactly it. What's wrong with that bloody country?
We're with May Pang in your pop-up exhibit at the R. Michelson Gallery that'll be here through Sunday. There's a reception this evening at 6 o'clock. It's called The Lost Weekend, the photography of May Pang. Looking back on your life, how would you like to be remembered?
Oh, good grief. I don't know.
Like, do you want people to say, like, oh, that was, May Pang, the Lost Weekend girlfriend of John Lennon? Or do you feel like you wish people would remember you in a different light?
Well, I think I wish people to know that I was also one of his biggest muse to writing certain songs and working on the albums, and that I helped him along, and also the work that I did in the music business, which a lot of people don't realize I did, working with a lot of singer-songwriters later on.
Like who?
Well, I helped this one guy, and his name is Bob Halligan, who's now pretty well known in the songwriting circles, and he was a Christian rock writer where I worked at United Artists. And I said to him, I can't really place your song with acts, that type of thing back in the day. We're talking like early 80s. And so he said, okay, what would you like? And at that point, Foreigner had just come out and all that. It's something on that level, not heavy rock, but, And he goes, okay, and he was so talented, and I always knew that. He came back to me like 3 hours later. He goes, I got a song I want to play you. And I loved it to the point that I said, go and get it demoed. He had a band, they could just demo it. I said, give it, and I'm going to go out and do something with it. And it turned out that song ended up on the Judas Priest album, and it was the only outside cut. And it's called Take These Chains.
Nice. So you have May Pang to thank for making Judas Priest
a
little bit cooler.
Take these chains off.
May Pang's exhibit at the R. Michelson Galleries is up currently and will be showing through Sunday with the artist in residence at the show. You can find more information at the gallery's website and see the documentary about the Lost Weekend on most streaming platforms.
Soon we'll hear the insightful lyrics and sweet vocals of Chris Matthews for Live Music Friday as she gets ready for a show at the Iron Horse tonight.
But first, a fond farewell to the Doctor of Rock, Steve Waksman.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com.
We're at the Iron Horse Music Hall on Center Street in Northampton, which is a little piece of living history of the music scene of Northampton. We just got back from across the street on Main Street talking to May Pang, who has a photo exhibit about her living history being associated with John Lennon and the Beatles. There is music history happening all over Northampton, and one of the greatest chroniclers of that music history is leaving us in Northampton, the professor of music and American studies at Smith College, the doctor of rock himself, Dr. Steve Waksman. Khalees and I both worked at WRSI. I worked there for a very long time. Khalees worked there for a good long time. But you came on my radar because one of your former students was like, you got to interview this guy who teaches a rock history course at Smith College and then brings his guitar in and plays Van Halen's Eruption as like part of the course study. You have been teaching rock and roll and other American studies at Smith for how long?
23 plus years. I started in 2001. I started, and then 9/11 happened like a week later.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
That'll derail anything for sure.
Which is hilarious because it means pretty much that the three of us all ended up in the Valley at basically the same time.
That's true, yeah. But now you're leaving us because you have an incredible opportunity across the pond.
Also, you're being given a lot of money to look at it.
Yes,
a lot of money.
That's why I'm moving. I mean, not just for the money, but the money, yeah.
Well, like the money to look into that is just like kind of fascinating.
It's about recorded music. Tell us about why you're leaving Smith College to go across.
Not recorded music, amplification.
Amplification.
Which, and that was actually going to be my first question, is like, why look at amplification instead of recording? I mean, like, there's chronicles of both, but definitely more for one than the other.
You're getting like what's close to $6 million from which institution in England?
I'm going to join the faculty at the University of Huddersfield, but the money's actually coming from this funding organization called the Leverhulme Trust. That is a private organization that does a lot of philanthropy around higher ed in the UK. So they're the ones who funded my position. The University of Huddersfield worked with me, kind of recruited me, and nominated me for this position. Like you had to apply for it as a competitive thing, but I had to be nominated by the university. I couldn't just apply as an individual to get this project funded. So what is it? Amplification. Why amplification? Well, on some level, you started to hint at an answer with what you just said. There's stuff about both, but there's a lot more about one than the other. There's tons of stuff about recording. It's not like we know everything we need to know about it. But people have been studying it very systematically for a long time. There's a whole organization, scholarly organization called Society for the Art of Record Production, for instance. There's nothing like that regarding amplification technology. Amplification is treated as a sort of means to an end that nobody really looks at as a thing unto itself. And in the work that I have done over the years, there's kind of an absence of commentary, really detailed, in-depth commentary on amplification in a lot of the areas where I do work. At a certain point, I was like, somebody needs to fill this gap. Like, there's no book you can get that's like the history of the microphone. There's no book on the history of the loudspeaker. There's no book on there's books on the history of amplifiers, but it's like, there's a book on Marshall, there's a book on Fender, and they're basically company histories that mostly just are celebrating, like, they made cool things. It's not really thoughtful work on, like, how this technology has actually affected people, how it has really kind of changed the world in terms of where sound fits into it. And that's the motivation, is to sort of understand something more about where sound fits into the world we live in. And I think amplification is a really compelling starting point for thinking about that.
It's hard not to think of the scene from Life of Brian where they're way in the back of the Beatitudes and Jesus is up there saying, "Blessed are the peacemakers," but he hears it as,
I think it was, "Blessed are the cheesemakers."
What's so special about the cheesemakers?
Well, obviously, it's not meant to be taken literally. It refers to any manufacturers of dairy products.
And so amplification would have come in very handy if that were a real scene from real history. But you are talking about how amplification, you're just at the beginning of this process. So you haven't done the research yet. But your hope is to talk about how amplification has influenced social movements and things.
Politics is definitely a part of it. And, you know, that comes into play in different ways. So there's the politics of just having a mass audience, which, of course, can be scary as well as productive, right? I mean, look at a Trump rally, right? That's amplification. And Hitler was a great believer in the power of amplification as a tool for creating mass movements. Germany was a place where a lot of innovations in amplification and public address system technology was made, and a lot of it was made during that era. Politics of amplification are not straightforward. But there's another side of it too, which I find interesting, which is like when you start amplifying things, there's also people who don't like that you start amplifying things. So there's also like noise ordinances and zoning rules that cities and towns have to pass in order to make sure that sound isn't too disturbing.
South Deerfield going through it right now with the Treehouse Brewing and the concert series that's going there all summer.
But that's also like a political line too, because there's always been like this idea of like neighborhoods that are loud, neighborhoods that aren't loud, and like when those lines rub up against each other and what happens then. All art is political, and all of these movements are political anyway.
In the 20s, when jazz was becoming a popular phenomenon, New York City passed all these cabaret laws, and a big part of it was precisely over noise control. And those laws remained in place until like the 80s and 90s. You know, like you can't have more than 2 instruments playing in a certain kind of public venue, period. It was all about like what kind of neighborhoods are supposed to be loud and what kind of neighborhoods are not, totally.
Talking with the Doctor of Rock, Steve Waksman, Professor of Music and American Studies at Smith College, for now until he goes across the pond to do this very well-funded research into the history and import of amplification. You will be amplified with your band here at the Iron Horse on Sunday. But you also have this incredible book that talks about the history of live music in America. And there is a famous person from the Paradise City, Northampton, who begins the book that you have wrote, that I'm assuming was a big part of why you were considered for this wonderful piece of research. Talk about the character who named Northampton, where you are leaving the Paradise City.
So you're talking about Jenny Lind, right?
I sure am.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Axl Rose.
Take me down.
We don't need to go there. Yeah, so, well, let me say this, okay? Like, I've talked about Jenny Lind in a lot of different contexts. One of the things that, when I was doing my research on her, really struck me was she comes to U.S. in 1850, right? And she's playing to, like, 6,000 people, 7,000 people, and this is very much pre-amplification. And somehow she's singing to this number of people, and they're kind of hearing her, right? But it's like 8,000 people with no anything except for the room you're in. And the place where she started doing concerts in New York was like called Castle Garden. It was not known for its great acoustics. It was not built as a concert hall. When I would read all these accounts of Jenny Lind performing, it was always fascinating to me how much the people who were reviewing her concerts would comment on how much they could hear her. Like, just not even how, there was a lot on how she sounded and how beautiful she sang, but it was also just like, you could hear her, right? Like, audibility is like a thing. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, like, doing that research is part of what tuned me in to this sort of monumental changes that amplification brought forth. On the one hand, it's fascinating to me that in the 19th century, before there was amplification, people were doing shows of that scale or even larger. I mean, there's this other guy, Patrick Gilmore, who was doing concerts a couple times in Boston, and he called them these peace jubilees. And he did 2 of these things in 1869 and 1872. 50,000 people coming to this Coliseum that he built in Boston Common just for this concert. And there, when you would read the reviews, it's like, yeah, you really can't hear. And, you know, so there's this evolution where part of the drive towards amplification is precisely like wanting to make music louder so that it can be available to more and more people. And there's an economic motive to that. There's also a cultural motive to that, right? Like what it means to have a crowd. That gets back to the politics of it. Mm. For purposes of where my research is going now, I see Jenny Lind as this really fascinating kind of precursor figure whose performances were of such a scale that they kind of demonstrated on some level the need for amplification. Like, if this kind of performance is actually going to be successful, you need more support than what was then available. Interestingly, though, when amplification really starts, it's actually less about that. It's less about public address, and it's more about amplifying electronic signals in media systems. So it's like tied to the telephone, and it's tied to radio. And I find that really fascinating, how you get from this effort to develop a vacuum tube so you can strengthen a radio signal to recognizing that the vacuum tube also allows you to amplify signals so that they're audible in the world in a whole different way. But you need a loudspeaker in order for that to be a thing, and loudspeakers come after that. Another part of what fascinates me about this project is all the intersecting parts that have to line up in order for this to become the phenomenon that it becomes.
More with Dr. Steve Waksman as he prepares not just for his farewell show at the Iron Horse this Sunday, but to leave the continent entirely.
And we'll also hear the many truths and hopes that Chris Matthews conveys in songs for Live Music Friday.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Dr. Steve Waksman, Professor of Music and American Studies at Smith College until December, when you will go across the pond and study this amplification of music. What's something you're going to miss most about the community of Northampton and Smith College?
I mean, I think the community of Northampton and Smith College is what I'm going to miss most. Like, seriously, I've lived here for 23 years. It's longer than I've lived anywhere else in my life. And the depth and breadth of the connections I've made to people here, I don't know that I'm even going to be able to reproduce that at any other point in my life. And it's a huge, huge thing to give up. And was one of the reasons why when I first learned I got this crazy research award, I had to think about it. Like, even though it was like this unprecedented, amazing opportunity, I was like, am I really leaving? That's going to shake my world up a lot. I'm kind of, I think, already a little bit in mourning of that. It doesn't help that everybody's like, you know, because I've been posting a lot on Facebook and whatnot. So for people who know me there, a lot of people think I already moved.
Even I thought you did for a little while there.
Yeah.
You were over there for some time.
Yeah. I was over there for like the better part of August. So, you know, when the semester at Smith first started, one of my colleagues was like, are you a ghost? You know? And I was like, not yet. You know, and leaving a job, like my job at Smith, it's like it's weird. I'm leaving and I'm not retiring. I'm resigning, which is just such a icky word.
Yeah.
I have to tender my resignation before the end of the year. You know, people don't typically throw big parties when somebody resigns from their job. There's a lot that's hard to leave behind in leaving Northampton. I'm glad that I seem to be moving somewhere I will actually enjoy.
How are the tacos, though?
Yeah, I won't even try tacos over there. Why would I eat tacos in England? At some point, I might, just because I miss them, and I'll then be like, yeah, there's a reason why I didn't do that. But there's a lot, you know what's really good there? Indian food is really good.
I was going to say,
yes.
plenty of good Indian
Yes,
food.
yes.
So
yes,
there's
sure.
trade-offs, right?
What do you think about the progress of academic music where modern non-classical music is concerned? As someone who wanted to do pop theory for her degree and was summarily shut down by the entire department and kind of had to figure out a workaround.
Yeah.
Like, I think that an academic look at pop and rock has come a long way over the past 2 decades, frankly, as the genres continue to grow and expand. So, and you're a part of that. Talk a little bit about how that shift has really happened.
Yeah, that's a great question, and obviously, like, I am implicated in it. To just put this out there before I more directly answer your question, one of the things that I think my colleagues at Huddersfield and I have discerned, and I can't say this is absolutely true, but we're pretty sure that the grant that we received is the biggest grant that's ever gone to anybody doing academic research in popular music studies. So that's like a thing. And I think it signals that, like, this research has become a lot more credible over the last couple decades. You know, by no means am I the only reason why that's happened, or even the main reason. But I've been part of that along with a lot of other people. I would say what I've seen in the U.S. is that there's a lot of really great people working on academic popular music studies and on the more practical side, but the practical side has been slower to catch up. Like, the stuff I do, which is more like history and cultural study, I think has gotten pretty well entrenched. I think the stuff that's more like music production and popular music performance, like, music departments have not, like, Smith is a good example. We've been so slow to offer dedicated popular music performance and production. We're starting to just now, as I'm like about to head out the door. And I've been advocating for it for years, but, like, departments only have so many resources, but also the history of music departments in academic institutions is that classical music always came first. And that's remained even more true on the performance side than on the kind of more scholarly academic side. The UK has actually been a lot quicker to adapt to incorporating pop music production and performance into its curricula. Like, they've been doing it consistently, I would say, for over a decade now. And so that's one of the reasons why I think I have this opportunity, is because groundwork has been laid there that hasn't been laid in the US in the same way. But when was it that you got summarily dismissed?
Like turn of the century, because I graduated in 2001.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, and I started at Smith in 2001, right? Smith started having popular music instruction for the first time as a regular part of his curriculum then. And
I missed it by this much.
Right. Well,
Also, I didn't go to Smith.
Right. But I mean, I think that's indicative. There's still a lot of institutional development necessary. I think there's a lot of really good people around, but music departments change slowly. Academia changes slowly. Even though like there's all this talk about innovation and this and that, but really like academia, there's a lot of it that's defined by a certain commitment to core assumptions and values. And it can be very hard to push certain kinds of change forward. And especially in departments where there's a certain idea that like things are just supposed to be this way. And classical music has been that thing for such a long time. So I think it's changing a lot right now. I think in the US, there's a lot more openness now than there was even 10 years ago for people to really focus on popular music from a lot of different vantage points. Like you could do it from a more squarely academic, theoretical or historical approach, but I think what's really growing is like the support of music industry type programs. The thing that's a little bit, to my mind, threatening about that, because this has already started to happen more in the UK, is that as it becomes more industry oriented, you might lose some of the like stuff that's more just like, let's think about this. Like the stuff that's more squarely scholarly, because the industry stuff tends to have a little more of a goal-oriented, career-oriented aspect to it. And that's kind of the drift of academia more generally. So I think part of the reason why music departments are becoming more open to this is because they're seeing like, if there are students around now who want to focus in music, a lot of them want to do it because they want to go into production, or because they want to go into some facet of music industry work that's not classical based at all. And this is a revenue stream. That's where the program development is really moving right now, I would say.
Well, Dr. Steve Waksman, Professor of Music and American Studies at Smith College, I, for one, am going to miss having you around here in the Northampton area. You've taught me so much about music, which is so dear to me. Even stuff that I would never have imagined about musicians and artists that I've loved for so long. Your ability to connect the dots between what just sounds like a pop song and the greater social import of those things, and your ability to articulate it so concisely and understandably is fascinating. You're like one of the easiest people I've ever had to edit in their speech. You basically speak in full paragraphs in such thoughtful ways about so many things that are so dear to us, which are the musicians who have made our lives so important. And the greater Northampton area will miss you dearly.
Thanks.
He's gonna cry.
You can come say goodbye to the Doctor of Rock this Sunday when his band, The Electric Eyes, plays right here where we are right now at the Iron Horse.
I mean, I want to just say in response to what you just said, Monty, obviously I really appreciate that. But you are one of the main reasons why anybody outside of Smith in this area knows what I think or what I have to say. Like, you have promoted my voice in a way that
I have amplified it?
Yes, indeed. in a way that I think is quite rare and unusual for the average academic person who's usually just talking to a much more self-selecting audience. And it's one of the other things I'm going to really miss about being here. I'm not going to have people honoring my arrival this way when I get to Huddersfield. That's part of what's been so special for me about living here. And you've opened doors that wouldn't have been opened otherwise. So I really appreciate that.
Tomorrow at 11 on the Fabulous 413 Weekend, you can hear a lot more about Steve Waxman's band, Electric Eyes. They'll play at the Iron Horse this Sunday along with Les Derailers and Stock Goblin. You can find tickets and info at ironhorse.org.
And while you're there, you can get ready to check out this next artist that will be playing there tonight. Chris Matthews joins us for Live Music Friday next.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, offering assisted living and compass memory support with evidence-based treatment for those with memory loss. More at armbrookvillage.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. Our guest for Live Music Friday is Chris Matthews. Already being hailed as, quote, the next Woody Guthrie, Chris Matthews is among the brightest stars of the new generation of social justice music makers. A powerful lyricist whose songs of compassionate dissent reflect her lived experience as what she lightheartedly calls the poster child for intersectionality.
Matthews began performing in 2010, but cemented her acclaim at Lincoln Center as the 2017 New Song Music and Performance Competition Grand Prize winner. That year, she also released 2 new projects, her album called The Imagineers and an EP called Battle Hymn for an Army of Lovers, which tackles social justice themes. Matthews also won the People's Music Network's Social Justice Songs Contest at the Northeast Regional Folk Alliance.
And tonight, she'll take the stage alongside Vance Gilbert and local hero Seth Gleer at the Iron Horse for a performance in the round that is not to be missed. She also was subjected to what we like to call Gossip Friday that was going on behind the scenes here while she's been in the studio.
Chris Matthews now knows all of our secrets.
Yeah, cone of silence for the radio of all that stuff, Chris Matthews. But let's start out with a song.
Absolutely. There's a whole lot in our culture I'd cancel if I could. Instead of banning books, I'd ban gerrymandering for good. The rich would feed the poor like the good Lord said they should, and every child without exception would feel loved and understood. No more whitewashing our history when the truth will set us free. No more watching corporate profits soar while people sink into poverty. No more telling kids they're flawed because you think that your God would. There's a whole lot in our culture I'd cancel if I could. There's a whole lot in our culture we should cancel right away. Instead of banning saying gay, we should ban racist holidays. Teachers should get to teach without worrying about their pay, or if they'll have an active shooter that they'll have to keep at bay. No more kids in bulletproof backpacks. It's a school, not a war. No more pretending that machine guns are what the Second Amendment was for. No more doing nothing because it's easier most days. Yeah, there's a whole lot in our culture we should cancel right away. There's a whole lot in our culture we could cancel if we tried. Instead of banning abortions, we could trust women to decide. Every size and shape of body could be normalized, and every type of mental illness could finally be destigmatized. No more squeezing and contorting into boxes we don't fit. No more saying that we're fine when we're not, but scared to admit it. No more telling little boys it's better not to cry. Yeah, there's a whole lot in our culture we could cancel if we tried. We've been marching in these streets, singing we shall overcome, praying all the world would give up all their bombs and all their guns. I just want peace of every kind for the whole world tonight, and to believe that Martin was right. We can drive out the darkness with the light. Drive out the darkness. Drive out the darkness. We can drive out the darkness with the light. Drive out the darkness. Drive out the darkness. We can drive out the darkness with the light.
Yay! Thanks so much. Thank
Chris
you so
Matthews,
much.
this Live Music Friday here in the Fabulous 413, performing tonight at the Iron Horse in the round with Vance Gilbert, who is unbelievable, and local hero, singer-songwriter Seth Gleer, singing Seth from Shelburne for the last 22 years.
I can't wait to tell him about that.
He'll be like, "Where did you learn
Who
this?"
told you this?
Like, I need pictures or it never happened.
Yeah, he used to perform on Rachel Maddow's Big Breakfast on WRSI
Amazing.
literally 22 years ago.
So incredible.
You started on piano and then moved to guitar, and I know that you used to play like a lot of left-handed folks end up having to play guitar upside down and backwards because most guitars are right-handed but like, how has it been now, like, moving? You're playing a left-handy now.
So this is a right-handed guitar.
Oh.
So I'm just playing it upside down and backwards.
Oh, still upside down and backwards.
Yeah, no, I'm not a convert. No, I'm still playing it wrong. Yeah, it was so crazy. So in college, my girlfriend at the time, so I went to Appalachian State for music education. I was going to be a band director, like, pretty sure that's all I was going to do with music. And my girlfriend at the time really wanted to learn how to play guitar. It was like the time of Friends. Everybody wanted to be Phoebe. Like, it was a thing. And so,
that smelly cat.
You know, exactly. So she was just like, "Can you teach me how to play guitar?" And it looked very simple. I mean, it only has 6 strings. The clarinet has like 2 million keys. So I was like, it can't be hard. And so I had to learn how to play on her guitar so that I could teach her how to play. And of course, she was right-handed. So I didn't have any intentions of playing the guitar. I didn't even write songs at that point. But the universe did what the universe does. So when it came time to like travel with something that was easier to carry than the keyboard, I was like, well, the guitar is smaller. That should be easier. And I already know how to play it. I'm not going to learn it twice. This is fine. And so I just kept playing it that way.
I know people in college like you, and when I discovered that this was a thing, because of course I'm right-handed, so I didn't really have this problem. I was like, what? Why? But they make them for you. Why would you have to do this? And it's just like, it's constantly astounding and really impressive that this is still the way that you play.
Yeah, it's like, it's easier if you learn it that way the first time. I can't even imagine trying to make myself learn how to play a left-handed guitar at this point, because I've just only ever played this way. But yeah.
Well, the universal symbol for distress is putting a flag upside down. So you playing a guitar upside down, but talking about the social ills of the world sends a very strong message in some ways. Everything's upside down.
Yes, it is.
And, you know, we mentioned in your intro that you've called yourself lightheartedly the poster child for intersectionality. People have likened you to Pete Seeger and all these great other social justice musicians that have connections to this area as well. Is it a conscious decision to say, I'm going to be a conscious songwriter, or is this just what comes out of you?
Yeah, it just is what it is. I think when I first started writing songs, you know, I was like everybody else. It was just like free journaling, you know, just trying to write about what I wanted to get off my chest. Therapy's expensive for folk singers. We don't have insurance, let alone insurance for therapy. And so, you know, it was just kind of processing. But for me, after Trayvon Martin was murdered, that just broke something in me in such a very specific way. And it was like this realization that I had this platform, that I have something that I need to say. And because I am in the folk realm predominantly, the audiences that I have the privilege of singing for, by and large, are people who do not check those boxes that I check. And I do check so many of them. And so the responsibility of that, of needing to kind of urgently have these conversations in the confines of a safe space. Music is such a safer space. You can have so many more of those conversations in the confines of music that people just don't have the capacity to have, just sitting even in front of each other one-on-one. They just get so defensive, their ears shut off, and on and on. But music has been such an important tool to be able to kind of navigate some of those really choppy waters, and we have got so much happening in this country right now. So yeah, I take that responsibility very seriously.
You've been touring a lot, playing a lot of festivals, just pounding pavement. But when you were here for the Franklin County Pride, you were in the middle of raising funds for a new album. Where's that at?
Yeah, so it's all done. We were originally going to release it on October 11th, but we're actually going to push that just a little bit because there's this other very cool thing that's kind of happening in the background that I'm not allowed to say about.
Oh.
And so it is done.
Gossip Friday,
out,
Chris Matthews.
Listen, I'm going to send it to you too, so you can listen to the entire thing.
I'm for it.
And all the Kickstarter backers have already gotten to hear the whole thing, and they're all so excited. I'm so excited for everybody to get to hear these songs. So you only have to wait just a little while longer. Everything is done. I just have to be given the green light to let it fly freely in the world.
Well,
good. I know we have to.
We're
going to
run out of time if we don't let you do another song here. As we mentioned, we're too chatty and we don't get to all the songs we want to get to. So let's hear one more from Chris Matthews, who's playing tonight at the Iron Horse in the round with Vance Gilbert and Seth Gleer.
All right. There's more red in the trees than there was last week, but not much in the trees in Tennessee. That's where you are. It feels so far. I've been resting my head on 100 different pillows. This old road is finally taking its toll on me. I don't mean to be taking a toll on you. It's so cold in Massachusetts where I am. I just wanna be holding your hand and in your arms. You're still so far. I've been counting the miles and the hours like the sheep. The last time I saw you is the last time I had real sleep. I don't mean to be taking it out on you. I'm sky high and southbound, now you're heading west. Can't wrap my mind around this hole in my chest, it's so hard. You're still so far. I wish that I knew how to do this much better, but broken hearts just don't mix with cold weather, baby. I don't mean to be taking mine out on you. I'm having a hard time lately. It feels like I'm going crazy from missing your touch. I miss you so much. There's more red in the trees than there was last week, but still not much in the trees in Tennessee. That's where you are. It feels so far.
Gorgeous.
Thank you very much.
Chris Matthews, what a wonderful time it's been getting to spend time with you today. And
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And you can do the same by going to the Iron Horse tonight, where Chris Matthews will be in the round with Vince Gilbert and Seth Gleer. Check out her song with Rhiannon Giddens online, which is like so powerful and just wonderful. And all of the extra stuff. You can go on a cruise with her next year.
Ooh.
You sure can.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Well, we got a lot of fun stuff next week on the Fabulous 413. We'll take you on a tour of the Food Bank Farm. We've got Images Cinema with their Halloween, October Horror Film Fest. We've got the debate happening at White Lion, the vice presidential debate that we'll have scenes from. We'll go to the Springfield Museums with Josh Simpson. But a quick shout out to some
all the things we couldn't fit into this week, because there's a lot of people getting things into the end of September, apparently.
Yes. Source to Sea cleanup. Get involved. Clean up your rivers tomorrow.
Yep. Garlic and Arts in Orange, the 2-day festival that happens where you can pick up all the garlic starts and eat garlic everything, including ice cream.
And a fun film with comedian Jimmy Tingle at the Shea tonight, talking about his run as a lieutenant gubernatorial candidate as a comedian. I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Khalil Smith. We'll talk to you next week on the Fabulous 413.